I don't ever go back to that low, that level. Like I always am like, you know what? Yeah, this kind of sucks right now, but I've been here before and I know that things will get better. So let's not worry about it. Let's just keep doing all the little things right every day. Stay focused. Sometimes it takes weeks or months before that thing that you want to happen happens. I mean, it can take years, but you can't focus on the outcome, right? Like I always say, surrender the outcome. Just worry about the things that are in your control and do the little things right. Because if you are just focused on the finish line, everything that comes at you in between is going to be, this hyper stress situation because you're worried about how you can get from A to B. But if you're just showing up every day and you're just doing the things that have helped you get this far, eventually you'll be happy with the outcome.
Hey, Mile 40 fam. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by the leaders in male grooming at Manscaped. They're helping us spice up the hair care regimen on our heads with something fresh. No, it's not a new razor. It's not ball deodorant. Get ready for the game-changing new Scalp Buffer by Manscaped. Let's break down why you need to add this bad boy to your hair care routine. First things first. Check out these thick silicone bristles. They're 100% antibacterial. No more germs hitching a ride on your head. The bristles gently exfoliate your scalp, and the product helps reduce flaking caused by dry skin and buildup. The bristles enhance shampoo penetration for more foam and less product juice. It's not just about feeling good. A better lather means better cleaning power. You can also pair it with the 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner from Manscaped for the ultimate hair care routine. These products are designed to work together, giving your hair the nourishment and strength it needs. Simply put, the Scalp Buffer is your scalp's secret weapon. Its antibacterial silicone bristles keep your scalp healthy, maximizes shampoo performance, gives you a soothing massage, kicks bacteria to the curb, and stores away like a champ. Take your scalp from zero to hero with the Scalp Buffer. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code MILE40 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code MILE40 at manscaped.com. Welcome back to another episode of the Mile 40 podcast. Thank you for continuing to tune in and for following along. Really appreciate all the feedback. These guests have been just so incredible, and I'm really, really fortunate to continue to have just such high quality individuals with powerful stories coming on to the show. If you haven't already, please be sure to hit subscribe if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts from. Check out the show notes. I have a discount code for picking up a copy of Audacious or Break Barriers. We're actually approaching the 5-year anniversary of Break Barriers, which is absolutely crazy. But again, I'm really, really grateful for all of your support. Today's guest is a special guest. I have Dr. Johnny Alexander. He's got a passion for working on the sidelines and in the locker room, truly enjoying the challenge of progressing individuals to a higher level of performance. He's had the honor of treating athletes of all levels, from CrossFit to the NFL, NHL, NCAA, Ironman, across the board. He's also worked as the team chiropractor for the Chesapeake Bayhawks Major League Lacrosse team from 2014 to 2017. He's been a certified active release technique provider for over a decade and also has extensive training in McKinsey protocols, Graston therapy, kinesiotaping, and SFMA, FMS. Born and raised right outside of New York City, Dr. Johnny takes pride in keeping New Yorkers in the game. Johnny, thank you for joining me.
Oh man, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course, man. Really appreciate it. You've been someone that I've been following for some time now. Sure. Like I mentioned before we hopped on here, our communities have definitely crossed paths. I guarantee you that you've worked with a lot of my friends, probably people who've been on the show.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I feel really fortunate that we've been able to make this happen.
cool.
And as we
Thanks for
kind
having me, guys.
of course. And as we enter marathon season, we all know, right? Like there's nothing more important than recovery. There's nothing more important than taking care of your body. And surrounding yourself with individuals who offer up the content such as you to remind us of where the focus really needs to be. So for the purposes of this podcast, before we kind of dive into your realm, let's just learn a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about childhood, upbringing, anything that we need to know about who you were before you became the businessman you are today.
appreciate having me, man. Thanks. Really cool opportunity. Yeah, I'm a local. I grew up about 40 minutes out of Manhattan. I'm a Jersey guy, typical Italian New Jersey family, big family, loud, energetic people. We love to eat, we love to party, have a good time. I played just about every sport you could imagine growing up. I say that I played sports for the experience. Now, I wasn't particularly great at any of them, but I just really liked activity and being on the field. And I was diagnosed with ADHD as a little kid, and I never want to take medication, so I just really got into movement as a way of kind of treating that and keeping me just kind of active and grounded. So for me, I'll say it over and over again, like movement is the medicine, right? Movement for me has been therapy. It's been really instrumental in making me the person I am today. So from kind of a young age, I just knew that I wanted to be involved in sports somehow. And when I got to college, I started studying, the sciences, and I was between, trying to do orthopedic surgery and physical therapy, athletic training. I mean, there's so many ways you can go with it. And I tried and dabbled into a little bit of everything. And then, in college, I had a car accident and found chiropractic totally by accident. And that's kind of how I switched gears and ended up doing this.
Tell us a little bit more about the car accident. I mean, I was
Yeah.
going through your website. It seems like that was a pivotal moment with regards to how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah, so I never really had any major injuries. Luckily, growing up as a kid playing sports, even, and I was a senior in college, and I was sitting at a red light, and I was on the way to a party, but dead sober, sitting there waiting for the light to turn green, and I looked up in my rearview mirror, and I just saw these blinding lights, like a car was pretty much about to drill me from behind. So I took my foot off the brake instinctually, and he nailed me. We went through a red light, and then I got hit by another car. So I guess he was texting, didn't really see me, didn't see that the light was red. I don't know. I guess potentially I could have saved his life, because who knows if he ran that red. But car was totaled. I went to the hospital. I was getting really bad numbness and tingling down my arm. And for me, somebody who's always been into exercise and sports, taking weeks off from the gym wasn't an option. So I was really anxious to get this figured out and sort through, how to fix it. And I did the traditional medical route. I did some PT, massage, and it really wasn't going anywhere. And I would feel better for a day or two, go back to the gym or try to do something active, and just immediately the pain would go back to where it was. So I knew that, this wasn't what it was supposed to be like, right? Like, I'm 21 years old. Obviously, I'm a pretty fit, active individual at the time. So I started exploring the other options, which a lot of times that's how people find me now, is we're not the first, stop in the way. It's almost out of desperation sometimes. But I found a chiropractor. I had no idea what they did. My dad knew them. They were able to treat me and just completely alleviate that. What I know now was a disc issue causing impingement on my neck, and the arms got a bunch of nerves that go down it. So that totally opened my eyes to what a chiropractor could do. I still didn't understand the role it would play with how you fit a chiropractor into a sports setting. And that niche at that time, 15 years ago, really wasn't existing. Like, there really wasn't a lot of good sports chiropractors that I could look to as a role model. So I just started looking around and reaching out to people, and it took me a while, but eventually got to really dive into that sports chiropractic world. And there were some good mentors I found, and I just immediately was like, you know what, forget med school, forget PT. Like, I need to do this. And so from the start, I knew I wanted to work with athletes, and I knew that there really wasn't a ton of people doing that yet as a chiropractor. So I was always just, what muscle techniques can I get trained in? What fitness techniques can I get trained in? I mean, just separating myself from what a traditional chiropractor does, even 15 years ago. Now there's a bunch of guys like me, girls like me out there. That space has really blown up. There's TikTok chiropractors, YouTube chiropractors. I think that there's at least 10 NFL teams that have a professional chiropractor on their medical staff now. I mean, I'd like to think that someday I would be considered as somebody who was kind of still in that pioneer phase of it. But when I started, there really wasn't those opportunities. So it's been really cool for me, just the timing of it all, to see how much my field has grown and just
Yeah.
kind of where I fit in that scheme.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me a little bit about the misconception when it comes to chiropractors, right? And when it comes to the work that you do.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like 100 years ago, chiropractic was founded by a guy who was almost opposing traditional medical field doctors. And there was this opposition where they were kind of saying that they did the same things and competing. And, chiropractors were like, don't go to the MD, come to us. And MDs were like, chiropractors are quacks. So there was this really bad division as my profession developed. In the last 50 years, it's changed so much. I mean, now, some of the best chiropractors in the world are integrated with, medical teams and hospital teams. And the understanding of what we do has changed so much. So there are chiropractors that are a little bit more traditional, where they kind of oppose the medical field and they just kind of do things more simple, where the chiropractic adjustment is the king of the treatment. And they don't do a ton of the rehab exercises that we do here, the soft tissue work stuff. Like, that's all kind of seen as, I don't want to say unnecessary, but almost secondary. And the adjustment is really the bread and butter of my field. People like me, they sort of see the value in all of it working well together. So there are patients that come into Warrior and they might not need an adjustment. And that's something that some traditional chiropractors are probably going to come from my head when I say things like that. But, there are people that have hypermobility issues, or it's really a soft tissue problem, and maybe there isn't an adjustment that's needed. As you start to work with people, things, kind of develop and you find other issues to work on. But that does surprise a lot of people when, they're going to a chiropractor, and maybe I'm not pushing an adjustment on them the first visit, or I tell them, actually, I don't think we need to do this. I think it sometimes gains their trust, where they're like, they realize that I really just want to get them better, no matter what we have to do. And if the adjustment isn't it, then it's not it.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to give two different scenarios and get your take on this. Someone like myself, an avid marathon runner, training year round. How often should I be seeing a chiropractor? Because I probably don't notice that there's probably a lot of buildup in my lower back, as a runner, right? And I probably should be seeing a chiropractor more often than I am. But I don't know what the sign is for when I need to see a chiropractor. So that's one scenario. And then the other scenario is I'm not a marathon runner. I am, just your average person, going about my life, working out regularly. Should I be incorporating a chiropractor into my health and wellness regimen?
The answer is yes. I can look at you and say, let's treat you like an athlete. And that's what I do with most of my people, whether they're not an athlete or they're just a stockbroker or web developer, whatever. Typically, there is a season. So maybe you're more active in the summer. And it could be as simple as the weather is nicer and you like to go for walks with your dog and your girlfriend. And, in the summer is when you're more active. In the winter, you're not doing as much. So we try to say, what are your goals going to be, right? Like, when the summer comes around, don't you want to be able to go play tennis a few times a week without worrying about blowing out your lower back? So I look at it as like, let's go back a couple months before your season would start, your active season, and try to do some maintenance care. Usually that develops, a schedule where I'm seeing you once or twice a month. There is no pain. There is nothing that is shutting you down. You're able to do the things you want to do, but I can improve your quality of life by doing maintenance work with you. There's always going to be some stuff we can find, whether it's improving your range of motion, improving your balance, your strength. Maybe there is an old injury that is not active right now because you're not really testing it. But we know that there's a big difference between feeling, no pain at rest, right, versus actually trying to be active in something. Sometimes people come in, they use pain as the only gauge of health and wellness. And if there's no pain, it's not broken. That's not necessarily true, right? We know that there's signs and there's things that we could always address before pain becomes an issue. So if somebody is training for, let's say, a marathon, we usually back them out 6 months and we say, if you want to run the New York City Marathon on November 4th, let's start working with you in April or March, right? And it will probably be more of a maintenance treatment where I might see you once or twice a month. But we know that as a marathon runner, your training will increase about 90 days before the race. And that's where we start to say, we'd like to see a little bit more. So for us right now in September, we are super busy because everybody, as you know, is at that peak of the pyramid. I was with a couple of runners yesterday and they're all hitting their long runs on Saturdays and Sundays. And one guy was at about 20 miles this weekend, right? And as a runner, most people aren't going to be able to run 20 miles and not feel something at the end of that or the next day. So we want to make sure that next Saturday he can go do 21, right? And that's the goal. So leading up to an event or a race, we try to be a little bit more precise with the treatments. And then there might be an off season where I only see you once a month, or I don't see you for a few months because you're not doing as much. But we know that, considering chiropractic is just part of the overall wellness routine. A few times a year, maintenance visits, whether you're in pain or not, is just a good recommendation.
Got it. One other thing I want to clear up for the audience, and I want to keep this at a high level, is when do I call my physical therapist versus when do I call my chiropractor? Where is the line there? Because I think
Yeah,
a lot of us are inclined to think, okay, I need to see a PT. Do the
right.
two collide, overlap, or is there a line where now I need to
Yeah.
call my chiropractor?
When you have traditional chiropractors and traditional PT, there's a bigger separation there. A chiropractor like myself, who focuses mostly on soft tissue injuries and exercise rehabilitation, the line is pretty blurry. What I like to work with personally, and I think that the culture of my office is we're working with people to kind of keep them at a high level. So you don't see too many people come in my office wearing a boot or a brace or crutches. We're not necessarily the acute phase of care practitioner or a post-operative care phase. So I would say that that is where the line is drawn. Like if you just had a surgery, something's been broken, something's been totally, dislocated or sprained, and you really can't do too many movements with it yet, go to PT. It'll be a little bit more hands off. It'll be a little bit more passive. The exercises will be a little bit more basic, but they might need to see you 3 times a week. And as much as I love some of my patients, I mean, some of them are my best friends, I don't want to work with you 3 times a week because I think that my hands are a little bit limited there. I'd rather see you after that first phase of care when you are trying to not just return to activity, but get to a place where you're in better shape than you were before the injury, right? Like we're not just trying to return you to the normal. We're trying to actually improve so that this doesn't happen again. So I think that when people are looking for like traditional physical therapy, if you're somebody that maybe had a surgery or an injury, like a painful, injury where you're really not able to do much, I would actually reach out and maybe start physical therapy for the first month of that, and then switch to either a chiropractor like myself who does some PT here, or just kind of somebody that has a little bit more rehab exercise training to get you back on the field or running. And traditional chiropractors, they typically see back pain, neck pain, headaches, like think spine. Chiropractors are the king. Not a ton of chiropractors work with foot injuries and knee injuries and wrist injuries. So if you're looking at just traditional stuff, I would say traditional chiropractor, think spine pain, back pain, disc issues, headaches. Traditional physical therapy, think sprain strains, think really painful, bad stuff where you're really just shut down for a moment. And then I'm right in between. So people who are kind of starting to try to get more active and do more things and really want to have some direction on how to do it without re-injuring themselves. That's where I like to operate.
One thing I'm curious about is hip mobility in particular. Um, Speak to me about how you work with athletes to improve hip mobility.
Yeah. So hip is it's a ball and socket joint. It's got a lot of rotation and a lot of access degrees of movement. So some of the fastest people we treat are actually they're hypermobile, where it's not necessarily like a tightness. It's such that they're so active that they actually start to lose kind of strength and stability. So some of those patients, we're actually working on improving core strength and muscle strength and joint stability, where we're not just like cracking their back, cracking their hip, popping them. It's really more about making sure everything's moving properly to get efficient motion out of it. And then teaching them some exercises that will help that as they are overtrained and as they continue to progress, right? Things that we see all the time with hip issues is the classic like IT band syndrome, or hip flexor issue, an impingement, labral tear. Labral tear is a scary one. Labral tear is often misdiagnosed. It's often left untreated until there's a pretty big tear there. And those are typically operative, where they have to go in and remove part of the labral tissue that is causing this, impediment there. So part of my job is to kind of recognize those red flags and, get you to a point where maybe we address things a little bit sooner than later, especially in the active population, because these people do not want to have to take months off and weeks off. They really want to be able to work through an issue.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Thank you for all that context. I mean, this is a lot of education, and I'm sure for the
Yeah,
listeners as well. There's definitely a lot of questions out there when it comes to your field in particular, and knowing when to call up on someone like yourself. So I'm glad that we were to ask those questions. Now let's talk about the business side of things. When did you start Warrior? Tell us about what went into starting the business, and perhaps even some of the obstacles you've had to overcome early on, in really getting things together.
yeah. So when I first started Warrior, it was a time in my life where I had worked for several different practices. I had seen things I really liked and things I really hated, and I just decided, you know what? As much as there's never a good time to just jump, there's never a good time, right? Like you just have to do it. And I learned trial and error, just literally learned by fire, right? I just jumped into it and made a lot of mistakes. But I'm glad I made those mistakes, because you learn from every mistake you make in your life. And if you don't make mistakes, along the way, when you do make a mistake and you don't know how to deal with it, it becomes a really, really big problem. So luckily, have had some adversity in my life and some challenges, and I think that it's made me a much better person overall. But I started my business the end of 2018. It was just me, and I was trying to kind of fill that void of in between the chiropractors and the physical therapists, like this new sports medicine person. So my challenge off the bat was really just proving myself to people, how I was different. I kind of, took pride in being the chiropractor that people who had never seen a chiropractor would go see, right? Like people would come into me and they'd be like, I don't believe in chiropractors and I don't care what, I just, all I know is you fixed my friend and I've been to A, B, and C and I need to. So I really kind of had to start from the bottom, where, every single patient I was trying to kind of prove myself to. And thank God, like New York City is so competitive and it's such a big market, but people talk and there's so much word of mouth. So once you start to do a really good job with certain individuals, New Yorkers, like
Yeah.
they'll tell everybody, whether it's good or bad, they've got
Well,
an opinion on
tell you if
it,
they
right?
love you or you hate you. They'll
Right,
know.
right. So I was fortunate enough to work with some great people that spoke highly of me to others, and it grew pretty quickly. And I was at a point in the end of 2019, and I was like, you know what? Let's get a bigger office. Let's hire some people. Like we're at capacity. And I had the keys in my hand, I had a lease that was about to be signed, and it was March 12th, 2020.
Oh, geez.
And, and it was about 2,000 square feet on Broadway. And the landlord was this old school Irish guy. And, I'm a self employed person, right? So they're digging into my financial history and everything. And I don't have any investors, I didn't have any partners. And this guy just could not get over the fact that I was just a single person running a small business in New York City. And all I had was 2 years of income on this business to show him. So he was just making my life hell. He wanted me to have a guarantor, a co-signer, and then he wanted, money up front, all this stuff. And thank God, right? Like at the time I wasn't sleeping. I was like, this is just, why is this so hard to open an office in New York City? And then the next day, Governor Cuomo got on the news and basically shut down New York City. And so I didn't sign this lease. And thank God, because 80% of my patients left New York that week.
Oh,
Half of them never
geez.
came back. So I would have been on the hook for a really, really big rent, a big construction cost, and there would have been nobody here to work on it. So looking back, I mean, we're talking a difference of like 5 days. If I had worked things out with this guy and signed it, I probably would have went bankrupt, and I would have let him. I don't know where I'd be right now. So sometimes it just shows you, right? Like the things that you think are meant for you
Yeah.
will always, the
You're
stuff
being
you're meant to
redirected.
find. Yeah. And so I luckily was just kind of here by myself during COVID. Really scary time to be living and working in Manhattan. But that whole year, I really was able to just kind of focus on what I really wanted to do when we opened. And at the end of 2020, people were starting to come back to New York. And I was like, you know what? There is never going to be a good time to do this. And I found a space. I was able to work through a deal. And people were telling me, Johnny, you're insane. New York City is dead. In person, business is dead. People do not want to do anything other than virtual. And maybe they were right at the time, but I had to do it. So opened this second location 2021, and it's just been growing since. Thank God.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that context. Um, Let me ask you, what did you even know about running a business? Right? Like when you think about your background and what you shared about growing up, being an athlete, always being into sports, and then finding, your interest in all this kind of in a on the back of a moment you never expected, an unfortunate car accident happened, right? Like I felt like you were always geared to do what you were doing from um, a scientific element. But running a business is another side of it, and running a business in New York is multiplying that by 1,000. And so, one of the things that I really admire about you is clearly you know how to persevere, and you know how to employ resilience. Is that the athlete in you, or where's that coming from?
And this might be like a little too personal of a
No,
story,
bring
but
it.
when I was a little kid, I was pretty introverted, and I was bullied really bad growing up. And kids are mean in general, but I just, being somebody who was really interested in sports and not great, particularly at any of them, there was a lot of, guys on the sidelines, like give you a hard time. And I was the smallest kid on the football team in high school. And there was one instance that really stuck out to me where, and I'm not embarrassed to say this. I was on the sidelines of the field because I wasn't playing. So I was on the bench, and a couple of the guys on my own team actually, who were bullies, right? Like they were big, tough football guys. They stood behind me and in front of the home crowd, like so in front of my parents and parents of other kids that I went to high school with. They took turns spitting on the back of me, like spitting on my back, because when you're wearing football pads, you don't feel something hitting you. So I didn't realize it was happening, and one of the other parents from sitting in the bleachers saw what was going on, actually came down off the sidelines to get the attention of one of the coaches and was like, there's these three boys that are standing behind Johnny and actually spitting on him. And, again, did I deserve it? Of course not, right? Like, could it have been worse? Of course. But it was just like a small example of something that really kind of changed and shaped me as I was growing up. So I just kind of had to learn to just persevere and to not really care about people's opinion of me. And just, I treat everybody the same, whether they're a celebrity client of mine or a professional athlete or somebody that's just trying to make ends meet and trying to fix an injury so they can go work out with their kid or take care of themselves. I just really see the world as a place where everybody deserves a chance, and I think that you know it's shaped me into being this really stubborn, driven person who is never going to go back to the version of me where I was a little boy and I was like, I'm just always going to put myself out there and not really be afraid to say what I think and do what I want, because time goes by really fast.
Thank you for opening up about that, and
Yeah,
I think it's important for us as listeners to have that context. You know, a lot of this podcast dives more into the person than it dives into what they've accomplished, because once you get to know the person, once you get to know what they've been through, you start to kind of understand the mechanics for how they shape themselves into who they are today. And when it comes to the bullying element of things, I could talk about that all day. I mean, the first book you see behind you talks about all the instances that I had gone through in childhood. um,
and I
and
think that's
yeah.
important because as an adult, I think I come off as somebody who is confident, and I am, and I think people probably just assume that that's always been the case, or that you know, again, right? Like I have a man bun, I've got tattoos. People probably, look at me and they think like this guy's an asshole. But you can't judge a book by its cover. And I think that it's really important that you just as you get older, you're just nice to people, because I can tell you there have been so many times in my life where somebody that I never thought could do anything for me just came out of left field and helped me in a way that I was so thankful that I was good to that person, whether it was years ago, college. I mean, sometimes people just come back in your life and you look back and you're like, man, I'm really glad I treated that person the right way. And not because I got something from them in the end, but it's because like you never know when you're going to cross paths with somebody, and where you're going to be in life, because things do change and evolve.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important call out, because a lot of people who had faced that kind of adversity are really good at employing empathy, right? Because you know what it feels like to be mistreated. And so you sometimes overcompensate by treating other people well in the hopes that, it'll come back to you over time, right? Like, and I was always kind of the same way. Like, regardless of like how I was treated, I always tried to make it a point to treat others well, hoping that someday it'll all click and everyone's just going to be nice to everybody, and like we won't have to deal with this anymore. But at the same time, though, when you deal with something like that, it could instill some insecurities. And generally speaking, there comes a point in life where there's an intersection of the old version of you and then the new version of you, meaning the person who's okay in his own skin, and the person who is like you said, like, I don't care what anybody thinks, like, I'm just gonna do my thing, like, and, like, I'll be honest, it probably took me decades to get to that point, like, after
Same,
everything that I
same,
had gone through, right? Like,
same.
um, can you think of whether it was a period of time or an interaction or something that kind of happened to you maybe in adult life, or it was like, "You know what? None of this matters. None of what they say matters. None of, what happened matters. All that really matters is I'm here to do this."
Yeah, I have a couple different circles I roll in. Some of them are my friends, my social friends. They're in nightlife, they're in restaurants, and New York City it's the city that never sleeps, right? So a lot of my most fun clients and my good friends, they have this lifestyle where they're at parties, they're out, they're clubbing and music, and it's really really enticing, but it's also not conducive to a health and wellness lifestyle, right? And then I have my other friends who are in this very competitive health and wellness space where they're counting every calorie. They don't have sugar. They haven't drank alcohol in 6 years. They're running 5 days a week at 5 a.m. So I kind of do fit in with both circles, and I try to just be moderate, right? I try to think, okay, I'm not going to conform. I'm not going to change myself to the groups of people that I'm with just because that might be what I want to do that day, right? So, when I hang out with my fitness buddies and they're all drinking these non-alcoholic beers, and they're giving me shit for ordering a taco or something, I'm like, listen, this is who I am, right? Like, if I want to have a vodka soda on a Friday night, or I want to go to a concert, or I want to sleep in a little bit, it's just my personality to just kind of enjoy the little things. And then, when my nightlife friends are doing crazy stuff, and I'm like, I really can't do much, this week. I have a big weekend. I have to get up early, and so it's like I'm just going to be always true to myself. And I post that on my Instagram. I post that on my TikTok. I mean, it's kind of like what you see is what you get, and it's really easy to remember things if all you have to remember is the truth, right? Like if you're not making up stories, you're not pretending to be somebody or do something. And it's really carefree lifestyle. Just being confident in things that you do and knowing that, you can be friends with people who are completely different than you and have different interests. And as long as you guys respect those differences and just learn to kind of love each other, there should be no pressure or anxiety where you feel like you need to be somebody else that day or fit into some social norm. I mean, I think that's all bullshit.
Absolutely, absolutely. You can learn a lot from those differences, and I think that's kind of the takeaway, especially in a city like New York.
Right.
It's unlikely you're going to find someone that you align with 100%,
Right.
and it's just a matter of learning from those differences. Um, when you look back on how you've evolved as a person and as a business now since 2021, it's been 3 years. Is there any moment that you look back on like that was really cool? Like, that was kind of like a growth moment for you.
Let me think. I remember, and I can't use any names, but I treated a really really famous singer, like a pop star, and I got this call, and it was through a buddy of mine who was training them, and they were like, so and so wants you to come to their home in Manhattan and treat them because they're not willing to go in public. They don't want to be recognized. Right? So we figured out a situation where I could kind of go there on the day I was off and bring my stuff and get there. And I was like, just so excited to. I mean, this was a couple of years ago, so at the time I really hadn't been treating that many, celebrities or whatever you want to call them. So I was definitely nervous, right? Like I was like, I don't want to do anything different. And I got there, and they were just so cool and so laid back and so appreciative of like the work I was doing with them. And after I was done, they were like, listen, like I've been around the world and I've seen people and chiropractors in 10 different states and 12, and they were just so like happy to have worked with me. And they were like, you're the best person that has ever put there. And I was like to hear that from somebody like that. I mean, it was just such a confidence boost. And then since then, I mean, there's been so many more, but I think that just going into that environment with like so many different things going through your head, when you walk out of there, you're like, this person is just like you and I, like when they're not on camera, like they're human beings, and connecting through the work I do and being able to like heal somebody and help somebody really like lets them just be the truest version of themselves. So now when I get a call and they want me to work with, somebody who's super famous or, I immediately go back to that place where I'm like, not really that nervous. I'm just kind of like, you know what, they need my help and I'm excited to work with them. And it makes me feel like, I can kind of I can treat whoever, like everybody really is the same in the end.
That's so awesome. That's so awesome to be going through an experience like that because to your point, there are so many different phases, right? There's an immediate phase of like who me? Like they want me to go, like and then it's
Right.
like, can I do this? And like I know I had to do my job, but like, can I do this at this level? And what if I mess up? If I mess this up, like, is this gonna, be a bad stain on my career for whatever reason? But what if I do really well? Then where is the opportunity gonna take me from there, right? And then to your point, it all comes back to the one realization that I think a lot of people don't consider is a lot of times when you're given those kind of opportunities to either be on big stages or to work with high profile individuals, you get to a point where you realize people watching you on those stages or those individuals, they're breathing the same air that you breathe, right? Like they're going about life in a very similar manner as you. And when you can come to that realization, maybe realizing one of the differences is probably just bank account size, like
Right.
it makes things a lot easier to digest,
Right.
and allow you to be you. Um,
I mean, I remember it was funny because I remember like even the week before that encounter, right? Like I was kind of in a pretty down phase. Like I was something small had not worked out, and I was kind of stuck in this phase of like, man, like is this really going to work out for me? And am I supposed to be? I just there was some. I was just having a bad week, and that opportunity arose, and I remember just kind of being in a place mentally where I thought I could have been doing better, and I wasn't super excited about where things were. Like it was a slow, challenging time. And when I got to that appointment, and I'm with this celebrity and this person who obviously has been all over the place and dealt with a lot of different things, and they were like, "Yeah, we heard you're the best," and I was like, "Really?" Like
oh
because
man.
it's like, wait, when? And like when I was like, when would I who So I was like, really? I was like, I'm not the best. Like there's a million people better than me, and I'm just trying. So it was definitely kind of humbling where I was like, man, like I might be doing okay,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. I mean, those are really, really important moments on your journey. Um, because and the thing about that is the people who are saying those things like you're the best or like I've heard good things about you, like they don't realize as they're telling you that, like that might be a small compliment from them, but for you, it's a huge change agent, right? And it's kind of like giving you the momentum that you need, not just in that moment, but then as you look back and start to question yourself, you remember, no wait, that person said like
yeah.
like I'm good.
And it definitely takes life experience to get there. Like now, when I'm having some down days or a bad week, I don't ever go back to that low that level. Like I always am like, you know what? Yeah, this kind of sucks right now, but I've been here before and I know that things will get better. So let's not worry about it. Let's just keep doing all the little things right every day. Stay focused. Sometimes it takes weeks or months before that thing that you want to happen happens. I mean, it could take years, but you can't focus on the outcome, right? Like I always say, surrender the outcome. Just worry about the things that are in your control and do the little things right. Because if you are just focused on the finish line, everything that comes at you in between is going to be this hyper stress situation because you're worried about how you can get from A to B. But if you're just showing up every day and you're just doing the things that have helped you get this far, eventually you'll be happy with the outcome.
You're absolutely right. I mean, you kind of took my next question away. Like I was going to ask you if there's essentially like a thought process or a mantra that you kind of lean into, and I think the way you stated it was perfectly. And I'll add additional point to that. When it comes to a lot of these things, like there is no actual finish line, and people forget that when you quote unquote get to that finish line. And I use this a lot when I talk about running, and I remind people that crossing that finish line, it's such a momentary feeling of relief, but it's not where you gain all the joy. You gain all the joy in the experience and the months leading up to it, in the uncovering of like, I can run 20 miles. Like I can make it 21 miles, right? Even when you hit, a new PR, there's that moment of like, that was sweet, but again, I think where the joy really comes is in the process to build up, like I can endure the training it takes to get
Right.
to that PR. And I think
Yeah.
that's an important takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, right? Like the journey is really what it's all about. You learn a lot about yourself, and it's important to set goals because it gives you kind of a measuring stick of how to time out the training process and what you should be doing along the way, right? Like people without goals, without long-term goals, without anything to kind of put on the calendar, they fall in a trap of just kind of waking up and saying, "Well, what am I going to do today? What do I want to do this week?" And you spend more time trying to figure that out than actually accomplishing anything. So I like putting goals on the calendar because it kind of makes you have to wake up every day with a plan. But to your point, the running, I mean, when you run the marathon, of course, it's like an iconic feeling and stuff. But really, the fun of it is the community and comparing notes with other runners and learning how to work through an injury. And it's like the endurance, right? I don't mean endurance in the sense of like running endurance. I mean enduring the process and becoming a higher level of you. I mean, that's really the beauty in it.
Absolutely. The parallels are incredible, right? And I think that's definitely the thing I'm going to walk away from this episode with. And I hope, the listeners kind of take a look back on this conversation and realize the moving parts for how this all came to be. That this wasn't, you know, this wasn't overnight by any means, and it took several life experiences to kind of get to where you are today. And as we close things out now, I just want to, ask you as you kind of look forward with regards to your outlook for Warrior, for yourself. You've built a brand. You've essentially built something that's bigger than yourself now, and you did it from the ground up. Talk to me a little bit about what your vision is for the future and what imprint you want to leave on those that get to know you, and what it is that you're building.
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to some of the stuff I was saying in the beginning, right? Like for me, when I walk away from like a chiropractic career, like one thing that I hope to be proud of, and I think I will be, is the legacy that I left behind for future sports chiropractors and just what I'm trying to do for that profession. Because I remember like yesterday when I was applying to chiropractic school, and I really could only find maybe five chiropractors in a 3 or 4 hour drive who work with athletes and who are known for working with athletes, but really only by other chiropractors. Like there really wasn't this community and this network of like sports chiropractors. So now that I am considered to being, I'm one of them. I'm so proud of that. Like I look forward to conversations. I get students that email me all the time and slide in my DMs, and it makes me feel really, really good knowing that I can remember being in their shoes and thinking like, why it's so hard to find somebody that I want to emulate a career after. So it's like really just so humbling to me when somebody reached out to me and then maybe they're thinking about becoming a chiropractor, or they're in chiropractic school and they're like, hey, I've been following you and what you've done and created is so cool. And it's like, not necessarily like I want to just be like you, I'd be just like you, but it's like, what you've created is kind of what I want to do with my life. Like that to me is the best feeling in the world, because as a chiropractor, that didn't exist for me 15 years ago. So when I look back at the legacy I've created, I really just want this community of chiropractors to just be known as, the sports medicine experts, and working well with PTs and MDs and kind of breaking down those barriers of where everyone's competing with each other and shitting on each other's profession. And, the PTs are saying F the chiropractors and the chiropractors are saying F PT. Like, I'm so proud to be in that community of all sorts of disciplinary people, and just really combining forces to get people better. So I think one day I'll be proud of that. I still feel like there's a lot of work to do, but to your point, right? Like you're never really done. So as long as you enjoy the process and you're proud of what you're doing every day, that's all I can ask for.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for letting us in on your life personally, professionally, for being a voice, for educating us. I mean, I learned on this episode, and I'm sure a lot of listeners are going to be walking away from this more educated. And so I just want to say, thanks for taking the time out and for coming on the
Yeah.
show with me today.
And I just want to say, thanks to you, like people like you and opportunities like this, like it really helps to get our voice out there. And that those opportunities didn't exist, especially for chiropractors 10 years ago. So I just really appreciate, you having me and letting me just, have an open mic with you. And,
You got it, man.
I'm always happy to do this again. And if you're in New York City, man, we'd love to have you.
You got it, brother. This was a blast. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode of the Mile 40 podcast, go ahead, subscribe, leave a review, and share the word. Thank you for being a part of the Mile 40 family. And let's unite in showing the world that comebacks are always greater than setbacks.